the letter that changed everything. At Christmas, I was working a double shift in the emergency room. My parents and my sister told my 16-year-old daughter that there was no room for her at the table. She had to drive home alone and spend Christmas in an empty house. I did not make a scene. I took action instead. The next morning, my parents found a letter at their door and started screaming. On Christmas Eve, I got home around 11:45 at night, completely dead on my feet. I had spent hours doing chest compressions on a man who kept insisting he was just tired. He was also turning blue. That was the kind of shift it had been. So when I saw Abby's boots sitting by the front door, my first thought was that someone was bleeding. Then I noticed her coat slumped over the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped shut, and her curled up on the couch in that tight and awkward sleeping position that made her look like she did not fully trust the furniture beneath her. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for the logic of the situation to catch up with me. She was supposed to be at my parents' place for their overnight Christmas tradition. She had begged me to let her drive herself just this once. She was newly licensed and incredibly proud of that fact. She had even left early so she would arrive on time and make a good impression. My husband and I were both working late shifts that night, so the plan had made perfect sense, until it did not. "Abby," I said softly. She opened her eyes instantly, like she had not really been sleeping at all, just lying there in the dark, staring at nothing. "Hey, why are you here?" I asked. She sat up slowly and shrugged. "They said there wasn't room." I blinked. "Room where?" "At the table." Her voice cracked halfway through those 3 words. She tried to cover the emotion with another shrug, but it did not work. "They said they weren't expecting me, that there were too many people already." She told me that her grandmother had said she could not just pull up another chair at the last minute. Her grandmother had looked stressed, like Abby showing up was simply adding to an already heavy load. "You got there on time, though," I said. "Yeah, right on time." Abby stared at the floor. She opened the door and just looked surprised, like I had shown up for the wrong holiday. She paused for a moment. Then she said there wasn't a bed left either. There it was, the backup excuse. She said they didn't want me driving home late at night, but they also didn't know where else to put me. So I left. "Did anyone offer to drive you home?" I asked. "Nope." I stared at her for a long second. "Did they at least let you eat something?" Another shrug. The table was packed. Lily was sitting in my usual seat. Grandpa was talking to her like she was absolute royalty. Nobody even looked at me. Then Grandma just said it was a full house this year, and Aunt Janelle nodded along like that explained everything. She glanced toward the small table by the kitchen. "So I left, but I made toast before I went." I turned and saw it sitting there on the counter. A single slice of toast on a paper towel, cold and slightly bent. Half a banana rested beside it. That was her Christmas dinner. I felt something coiled tightly in my chest. Not anger, at least not yet. Just that cold and glassy feeling that comes right before everything shatters. "I wasn't really hungry anyway," Abby said quietly. "Not really." That was the moment her eyes started to fill with tears. She fought them hard. She looked up at the ceiling and blinked rapidly and bit her lip like she could somehow chew her way out of the emotion rising inside her. "They made it seem like I had imposed," she whispered. "Like showing up after everything had been planned was somehow rude of me." And then she cried, quietly and slowly, like a faucet you simply cannot turn all the way off. "I was going to bring a pie," she added after a moment, "but I thought they would already have enough food." I sat down beside her and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me without hesitation, like she had been holding herself upright through pure spite and had finally run out of energy for it. After a while, she wiped her nose on her sleeve and spoke again. "I know they don't really like you," she said carefully, "but I thought I was just the kid, not part of whatever that was about." I nodded slowly. "You thought you were separate from all of it." "They didn't even say it meanly," she added. "That's the strange part. They said it like it was just a practical problem, like I was a folding chair they didn't have space for." I did not go to bed that night. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring at her overnight bag still perfectly zipped. She had packed it so carefully. She had picked out the sweater that my mother had once mentioned she liked. She had brought a small tin of cookies she had baked herself. I opened the refrigerator and stared inside. There was nothing special in there. We had not planned a backup Christmas. Why would we? We had trusted them completely. That was the part I could not get past. Not the cold toast, not the lack of food, not even the fact that she had driven home alone in the dark on Christmas Eve. It was the image of them looking her directly in the eyes, this sweet and awkward and genuinely brave girl who had shown up on time with homemade cookies and a smile, and telling her with 28 people crowded inside that there was no room for her. They did not mean they had run out of physical space. They meant they did not want her there. They meant not you. The next morning, my husband came home. Abby was still asleep. I told him everything that had happened. He stood in the middle of the kitchen for a long and heavy moment and then said, "So what do we do now?" I did not answer, not yet. But I already knew. Because there is turning the other cheek, and then there is standing by silently while a 16-year-old girl who just wanted to sit at the table is turned away on Christmas Eve. They had chosen the latter, so I would choose accordingly. I did not make a scene. I did something else instead. 2 weeks later, my parents opened a letter and started screaming. I do not remember the first time someone called me the weird one in my family. It probably happened before I even understood what the word meant. When I was 6 years old, I found a dead bird in the backyard and asked if I could dissect it. I was not trying to be disturbing. I simply wanted to understand how it worked, how all the small pieces fit together inside such a tiny body. My mother slapped the kitchen counter and said, "Jesus, Kate, what is wrong with you?" My sister, Janelle, screamed and told everyone in the neighborhood that I was trying to build a zombie. I got grounded for scaring her. That moment set the tone for just about everything that followed. I loved anatomy books. I wanted a microscope for Christmas every year. I asked questions about blood flow at the dinner table. At school, I was the one who actually raised her hand and meant it. In my family, that was more than enough to get you labeled a show-off. Nobody else in my family had gone to college. Most of them had not finished high school on the first attempt. I was the only one who studied during commercial breaks or studied at all. By the time I was 12, my father had started joking, only half joking, that I was not really his. "Too smart to be mine," he would say. Then he would laugh like it was a perfectly acceptable thing to say to a child. One night I overheard him arguing with my mother when they thought I was already asleep. He asked her if she had ever been unfaithful to him, said he had always wondered because I did not look like anyone else in the family. I did not sleep much that night. I never asked about it directly. I still have not. By the time high school came around, my sister Janelle had perfected her role as the golden child. She was loud and likable and thoroughly average in school, but she was absolutely excellent at turning every failure into an entertaining story. People loved her. She knew how to cry on cue, and she made sure everyone around her understood that she was the one looking out for poor, awkward Kate, the one who could never take a joke. She used to call me Dr. Freak in front of people. When I actually became a doctor, she upgraded it to Dr. Moneybags. Progress, I suppose. When I received the full scholarship, my parents were strangely quiet. There was no celebration, no hugs. My mother asked who I thought I was going to end up marrying, since men did not like women who acted smarter than them. I told her that maybe I would marry myself. She did not find that amusing. They did not give me a single cent toward my education. I waited tables all the way through medical school, took every shift that nobody else wanted, came home with aching feet and burnout settling into my bones like something permanent. Meanwhile, my family back home told anyone who would listen that I was living the dream. They did not visit once. Years later, after my second residency, I finally landed a steady job that made me feel like I was no longer drowning. My husband and I had met during an overnight shift, which is only romantic if you find shared exhaustion charming. Eventually, we moved to a place where we could afford more than instant noodles, and that was when the calls started. Could I help with the electric bill? Could I co-sign a lease? Could I talk to one of my doctor friends about Uncle Pete's back lump? I helped with most of it, often without hesitation, and often without being asked twice. When my parents were approaching retirement far too early and with virtually no savings, I stepped in without waiting to be convinced. They had never owned a home, had always rented, and had spent decades cycling through bad credit and bad decisions, and whatever excuse happened to fit that particular year. So I bought a modest 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift. I said I would handle the mortgage entirely. The house was in my name, but they lived there as though it belonged to them. Rent-free. Utilities covered more often than not. Medical costs handled through my insurance access. I never said no. Until recently. A few months before Christmas, Janelle called me. Lily, her daughter, the one who could absolutely do no wrong in the family's eyes, had been accepted into a prestigious STEM summer program. "She's got your brain," Janelle told me, and she said it like she was paying me a compliment. I asked how much the program cost. $1,200, she said, "but it's worth it, and you of all people should understand what this means for her." That was where I stopped fully listening. Abby had never attended a camp like that, not because she was not capable. She simply never asked. She is practical and thoughtful and would not dream of requesting that kind of money from me, even though she absolutely could have. I told Janelle no, politely but without any room for negotiation. I explained that I was already covering our parents' mortgage, their medical bills, and their emergencies on a regular basis. I suggested that she look into financial aid or a payment plan. Her tone changed immediately. "Wow, must be nice to have everything and still be so stingy. She's your niece. You're just jealous because Lily is actually going places." That last comment was almost funny. It would have been funnier if I had not heard my mother mutter something nearly identical a week later when she thought I was out of earshot. Apparently, I was holding Lily back, just as I had always held Janelle back by being the smart one who made everyone else look bad simply by existing. I did not argue. I did not explain myself. I said no and I meant it. That conversation happened 3 weeks before Christmas. Abby had been genuinely excited about the holiday. She told me she felt grown up being trusted to drive herself there. She had packed her overnight bag with care, had chosen her outfit thoughtfully, and had even wrapped small presents for the younger cousins by hand. I kissed her goodbye, told her I would see her in the morning, and reminded her to text me when she arrived safely. She did. For a few hours, everything seemed completely fine. And then I came home from my shift, stepped through the front door, and discovered that fine had apparently been canceled sometime during the evening. Abby looked up from the couch with that particular wobbly smile that says, "Please pretend this is not a disaster." She told me in the smallest voice she had that her grandmother had quietly told her there was no space at the table or anywhere else in the house. This was despite the fact that Abby had counted 28 chairs currently in use around the tables. It was a math problem with exactly one variable. "Sir." I listened to everything she told me. I let the weight of each word settle into the room like something dropped from a great height. Then I wrapped my arms around her and let the quiet do all the talking. She fell asleep that night still wearing the sweater she had picked out especially to impress them. When the house finally went still and dark, I sat alone in the kitchen and stared at the spot where her Christmas dinner should have been. I replayed every mortgage payment I had made, every utility bill, every single just this once Katie that had gradually and silently become forever. They had not run out of room. They had run out of gratitude, and they had chosen my daughter as the messenger. That was the moment the switch inside me flipped completely. There would be no more explanations, no more polite negotiations that went nowhere. I did not even spend time deciding whether I would act. I only decided how soon. The morning after Christmas was quiet in that particular way that follows big holidays, the world still slightly foggy and hung over on sugar and torn wrapping paper. My husband drove with me in silence. His hand rested lightly on my knee, not exactly comforting but solid and present. That was enough. I had been hoping the house would be empty when we arrived. It was not. 2 extra cars sat in the driveway. I recognized one as Janelle's. The other likely belonged to a cousin who had stayed for leftovers. I held the envelope tightly as we walked to the door. I had not slept. The shift, the scene with Abby, the cold toast still sitting on the counter that nobody had bothered to clean up. All of it was humming steadily in the back of my mind like a blown fuse that refused to go quiet. I rang the bell, waited, nothing. I rang again and knocked, still nothing. "Let's just leave it," my husband said softly. I stood there a moment longer and then nodded. We walked back toward the car. I tucked the envelope carefully into the door frame where it would not blow away in the wind. I was opening the driver's side door when I heard it, the creak of the screen door, a slippered footstep on the porch. I turned. My mother stepped out wrapped in one of those fuzzy robes she always wore during the holidays, the kind she used to brag about finding for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and began reading. Her face went blank, then pale, then she screamed. "Frank," her voice cracked like a wire that had finally snapped. "Frank, get out here, she's throwing us out." My father appeared at the door in yesterday's clothes. What the hell? Janelle followed behind him, still in her Christmas pajamas and clutching a coffee mug like she had been expecting a cozy holiday morning. My mother turned and pointed down the driveway at me like I was a stray animal that had done something unforgivable on her porch. Whatever she said next was cut off by the sound of the car door closing. I drove away before the full sentence could reach me. It did not matter. I already knew every word in that particular catalog. By the time we got home, my phone had already started buzzing. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. On the sixth call, I finally picked up. "How dare you?" My mother's voice came through before I even said hello. No greeting, no pause, no pretense of concern for Abby. Not even a single word about what had actually happened on Christmas Eve. "You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my father shouting in the background. "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours," he bellowed. They did not ask why. They did not ask what had happened. They did not mention Abby once. I hung up. They kept calling. Janelle began texting. One of her messages actually said that this was going to ruin my professional reputation and that I should think about my career. My patients, as it turned out, did not particularly care about where my parents lived. By evening, my phone looked like it had survived a particularly dramatic breakup. 32 missed calls, 14 text messages, 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to reach out, nodding that it was not really his place, but that this felt extreme and that you only get one mother. I did not answer any of them. The next morning, there was a knock at my front door. I looked through the peephole. Of course, my mother. She was standing on my porch in that same fuzzy robe, holding the eviction letter now crumpled and slightly damp, like she had been squeezing it continuously for the past 2 hours. I opened the door, but did not invite her inside. She did not wait for an invitation. "You're really doing this," she hissed, "after everything we've done for you." I let that hang in the air between us for a full second. Then I said quietly, "You mean the house I bought for you, the bills I paid every month, the health coverage I arranged because your Medicare did not cover your blood pressure medication." She flinched for just a millisecond. Then she straightened up, eyes sharp and hard again. "We raised you, we gave you everything." "You didn't even let my daughter eat dinner," I said. That stopped her briefly, but she recovered quickly. "Don't be dramatic, we didn't have enough chairs." "There were 28 people there," I said, including a neighbor. Her lips pressed together into a thin line. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I continued. "But if you genuinely believe you can treat Abby like she is disposable and face no consequences for that, then we have a serious misunderstanding to clear up." "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped, suddenly animated again. "Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing your entire family apart over a misunderstanding, and now you're actually threatening your own parents." She held up the letter like it was evidence at a trial. And then, in what I can only describe as a moment of pure theatrical instinct, she ripped it directly in half. She stood there and tore it straight down the center, apparently believing that this gesture would somehow void an actual legal process. "There," she said. "That's done. Now if you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Lily's science camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum." She smiled like she had just solved the entire situation in one elegant move. I did not say anything in response, because that was the moment I understood with complete clarity that they had never taken me seriously. Not when I was a child, not when I became a doctor, not even standing here in front of them as a fully grown adult who owned the house they were standing in. To them, I was still the awkward science-obsessed girl who should be grateful for whatever scraps they offered and remain quietly in her place. The girl they resented, but never once genuinely respected. They believed I would not follow through. They were wrong. I let my mother walk off my porch, still muttering to herself like the hero of some tragic story she was composing on the spot, and I closed the door behind her. Quietly, calmly, with absolutely no drama at all. But inside my head, I was already planning the next move. 2 mornings later, I sat across from a lawyer and laid everything out in clear and specific terms. The house in my name, 7 years of mortgage payments, the utility bills, the dental plan, the quiet and unremarked upon sacrifices that had added up over an entire decade. He did not flinch at any of it. "I assume you want formal eviction proceedings," he said, in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. I nodded. The formal notice went out that same week. 60 days, completely legal, paper stamped, signature required upon receipt. This time there was nothing to tear up and pretend away. I continued paying the mortgage throughout the process. I was not about to let my credit rating suffer for the sake of making a point. But everything else disappeared. Utilities, cable, medical reimbursements. They received an immediate and very practical education in what life without my support actually looked like. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door. It was Aunt Elaine, the aunt I had always considered one of the decent ones. She arrived with a tin of cookies and a carefully rehearsed expression of concern. I let her in. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she began, "throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding." I laughed once. It was not a warm laugh. I told her everything. The house, the bills, what had happened on Christmas Eve, the 28 chairs, the single slice of cold toast on a paper towel, how my daughter had driven home alone in the dark because the family had determined there was simply no space for her at the table. Aunt Elaine went pale. "I didn't know," she said. "They didn't tell you," I replied. She left looking like someone who could not unhear what they had just heard. 3 days later, I received a text message from her. It said simply, "I did not understand before. I do now." 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called to confirm that my parents had made no effort whatsoever to find alternative housing or make any kind of arrangement. "Then we proceed," I told him. I listed the house that same day. I set a fair price, not inflated. I was not trying to extract maximum value from the situation. I simply wanted it finished. A buyer made an offer quickly. Families love that area. They requested vacant possession, which was entirely standard. I noted that and moved forward. I did not go to the property on the day my parents were removed. The new owners handled it through the appropriate legal channels. I heard afterward that it was not a smooth or dignified process, but what followed was not significantly better for anyone involved. Janelle took our parents in. Of course she did. My sister had always enjoyed the role of the better daughter. She gave what amounted to interviews to various cousins, treating the situation like a press event. She said I was abandoning them. She said it was all over one holiday mishap. 3 weeks later, she was standing on my doorstep with bloodshot eyes, and her hair pulled into a frizzed bun that suggested she had not slept properly in days. "I can't do it," she said, without even attempting a greeting. "They're fighting constantly. Mom thinks my living room is too small. Dad says my kids are too noisy. They refuse to share a bathroom. I'm going completely insane." I leaned against the door frame, with my arms crossed, and waited. "They need to find a rental," she said. "You could at least help with a deposit, just enough to get them started." "No," I said. "You watched my daughter get turned away on Christmas Eve and you nodded along and said nothing. That was your choice. This is mine." She blinked at me. Then she turned and walked away without another word. A week after that, she made the same choice and asked them to leave. They eventually landed in a small rental that nobody would choose to describe proudly. 2 rooms, 1 aging heater, a front step that tilted at an angle like a shrug. Their pension barely stretched to cover rent and food. The vacations were gone. The dinner parties were gone. The anniversary cruise they had been casually planning for years was gone. They attempted to rally sympathy from the extended family. They told people I had cut them off without any warning, that I was unstable, that I had always been cold and difficult and impossible to connect with. But by then, I had quietly reached out to several uncles and cousins myself. I had forwarded copies of the bills I had paid over the years, along with the formal eviction notice, time-stamped and certified. The responses from the extended family were not exactly rallying cries of support. One cousin replied with a single word. Another sent a thumbs up. The family was not rushing to rescue them from the situation they had created. Neither was I. 2 months later, Abby and I were sitting together on the back porch on a warm afternoon, drinking iced tea and making no particular plans. Just a quiet afternoon with nowhere to be and nothing to perform. "I don't miss them," she said after a while. I looked at her. "Neither do I said honestly. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Unknown number. I opened the message out of reflex. "Hope you're proud of what you've done." I deleted it without pausing, without taking a breath, without feeling anything in particular. "They'll probably text again," Abby said casually, watching me. "They always do," I said, "but they are not my problem anymore." And they were not. They said there was no room for Abby at the table. So I made sure there was no room left in our lives for cruelty, for control, or for the particular brand of manipulation that dresses itself up as family loyalty. 2 years have passed since that Christmas Eve. They are still in that small rental. They are still, as far as I can tell, blaming everyone around them for where they ended up. Abby is thriving. She is studying exactly what she loves, and she is genuinely happy in a way that I had not seen from her in a long time. The money from the sale of the house covered more than just practical expenses. It bought her peace of mind, and it gave me something that had been a long time coming. A little bit of closure. I do not answer their calls. I do not send money. I do not lie awake at night second-guessing myself. I protected my daughter. I chose her, finally and completely and without apology. But I will leave you with the question I still think about sometimes. Did I go too far, or did I go exactly far enough?